好，大家晚安。
Good evening to everyone.
那我们继续跟大家来分享这雅比斯的祷告。
And tonight we shall continue our discussion on the Prayer of Jabez.
这是在历代志上的第4章9到10节。
And this is recorded in 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9 to verse 10.
我们已经讲过这雅比斯他是犹大，他属于犹大支派的哈。
And we have discussed previously that Jabez, he belongs to the tribes of Judah.
到底为什么突然间出现这个人物，圣经并没有写哈。
And how is it that suddenly in this passage it is started record about this particular character? The Bible doesn't tell us the reason.
但是我们可以知道雅比斯他的意思就是忧伤的意思哈。
But we know that the meaning of the name Jabez means sorrowful.
妈妈会取这个名字是因为他生他的时候是在忧伤这当中了。
And the reason why his mother gave him this name, it is because she bore him in pain.
可能是难产哈。
And then it is possible that because the labor was difficult.
或是他的爸爸过世哈。
Or perhaps at the time his father passed away.
因为他的名字是妈妈在取的嘛哈。
Because his name was given by his mother.
不管如何，他却圣经说他成为尊贵之子就是他比他众兄弟更尊贵。
However, it doesn't matter which one it is. The Bible actually recorded that he was more honorable than his brothers.
那为什么呢？这后面谈到说他的向神的祷告。
And why was he more honorable? And the following passages recorded his prayer.
那我们也谈到说他求告以色列的神。
And we've also discussed and talked about how he called upon the God of Israel.
为什么用以色列的神？我已经解释过了。
And I've already explained to you all why he called on the God of Israel.
雅各从雅各到以色列最大的差距，雅各后来改名叫以色列嘛
We know that Jacob, his name was later changed to Israel.
他一直都没有改变他很会抓的这个性格。
And as for Jacob, he never changed in his personality. He kept on grasping and seizing hold of opportunities around him.
只是一开始他所抓的是他抓他想要的。
And at the beginning, we can see that he grasped hold of things that he personally wanted.
但是到后来他学习怎么抓住神。
Later on, he actually learned to grasp hold of God.
那因为抓住神之后，你可以看到他的人生有很大的改变。
And because he knew how to grasp hold onto God, we can see that his life changed.
甚至他到晚年的时候说到这个神是牧养他一生的神。
And when he was advanced in age, he even expressed that the God of Israel is a God who was his shepherd throughout his life.
如果你去看那个羊他跟着那个牧羊人，就可以了解为什么雅各会这样讲。
And if we observe how the sheep follows their shepherd, we can come to and understand why Jacob described his life in this way.
因为在巴勒斯坦那些羊尤其是那个绵羊，他们会有近视眼的。
And because in the land of Palestine, the sheep, they don't have a very good eyesight or vision.
所以他们就是一直会跟着这个牧羊人，跟在后面跟得很紧。
And because of that, they will follow their shepherd very closely behind.
那就像雅各一样，一辈子抓住神，然后真的神就带领他到他人生的最后这样。
And just like how Jacob behaved, he grasped hold onto God very tightly and allowed God to guide him for the rest of his life's journey.
所以如果你要像这个雅比斯说那求你赐福给我，最好的方法就是不断的抓住神。
And so if we want to be like Jabez and that we pray to God to bless us, then one lesson we need to learn is to learn to grasp hold onto God.
那第二个他说他要求神扩张他的境界。
And second thing he asked God in his prayer was to enlarge his territory.
那昨天我已经讲，如果这个是指的土地的话。
And I've mentioned this yesterday, that if this territory refers to the land in which he possessed,
那只有可能发生在他们刚进迦南地之后，要跟这个迦南七族打仗来扩张他们的地。
And this can only occur at the time when they just entered into Canaan and that they must wage war against the Canaanites to possess the land.
那另外一种是所谓的侍奉的境界的扩张。
The other possibility that we've discussed is that it refers to the enlargement of his service to God.
因为第2章55节谈到有一些文士是住在雅比斯的家中。
Because in chapter 2, verse 55, it talks about there's a family of the scribes who dwelt together with Jabez.
这个文士特别是指的这些抄写神律法或者整理一些神的话的这些人。
And this group of scribes specifically refers to those who copy the laws of God or those who write down specific instructions or regulations from God.
比如说以斯拉他就是文士嘛。
And for example, we know Ezra, he was a scribe.
那当然这个是要花费相当大的，所以雅比斯的家族来赞助这件事情。
And the work that the scribes needed to do requires a lot of support. Therefore, Jabez and his family supported them in this work.
那我个人是比较倾向是属于这类的扩张。
And as for me personally, when I studied this, I'm more inclined towards explaining that he is praying to God to enlarge his territory in terms of his service to God.
换句话说，我们自己本身在侍奉的领域也要扩张。
In other words, what we can learn from here is that we also need to pray to God to enlarge, to expand in terms of our services to him.
我们常常会想要做跟满足成就感的事，这个当然是很好的啦。
So, and a lot of times we all wanted to do certain works that makes us feel accomplished. This is quite natural.
因为符合我们的专长，然后也最好的有达到最大的效果。
And because we are quite skilled in this particular area and that we are able to produce good results from it.
那渐渐的你就要进步到所谓的要侍奉那种任务在身，然后要经过训练的这种侍奉。
But gradually, as we serve God, we need to venture into a stage where we need to take on duties and responsibilities to go through specific training in order to do the work in our service.
那这个还不够。
And this is not enough.
我们来看一下这个昨天忘了翻这个约翰福音。
And so let us turn to a passage in the Gospel of John.
第21章
Chapter 21.
第18节。
Verse 18. John chapter 21, verse 18. Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wish. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish.
最后我们讲说这个主耶稣跟这个彼得说，你年老的时候要人家带你到不愿的地方去嘛。
And in this passage, Jesus spoke to Peter, telling him that when he is old, then he will be taken to places that he do not wish to go.
所以我把它分成2种侍奉，一种是年少的侍奉，就是你想做，你可以做你想做的。
So we can divide our services into two periods. And the first one is a period when we are younger, and it is a time when we were able to work in areas that we like.
那当你比较成熟的时候，就要学习做那个你不想做的，但是你应该要做的。
However, as we mature in our services, then we need to learn to do the things that we do not like to do.
好，那昨天我们也谈到这个属灵的扩张，也有是指也可以指在教会当中，我们当然要教会的疆界要扩张，这个我们常常在讲。
So yesterday we mentioned about spiritual expansion. We also talked about in terms of the church also needs to expand and grow. This is correct.
所以我们也要为这件事情祷告。
And we need to always pray for this matter.
以弥迦书第7章11节说，你重修墙垣，那个境界就开展。
In the book of Micah, it is recorded that when you rebuild your walls, your boundaries will be extended.
好，那这个你墙修好了，这个城修好了，然后境界就会开展了。
And the moment that you have rebuilt and repaired your walls, then your boundaries can be extended.
那我个人认为说，对我们个人来讲，我们要怎么让我们的属灵的境界开展？
However, as for us as individuals, how do we expand our spiritual territories?
我们请看一下这个以赛亚书。
Let's turn to the book of Isaiah.
如果你看第12节，那他说12节说，那个出于你的必修造已经荒废之处。
Isaiah chapter
58章
chapter 58.
第12节。
verse 12. Isaiah chapter 58, verse 12. Those from among you shall build the old waste places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in.
这边有一个叫做你必称为补破口的那个，当然是指的那个墙，你要把它修整起来哈。
And here there's a phrase that says, you shall be called the repairer of the breach, which refers to you're a person who repairs the broken walls.
就像这个弥迦书一样，那个墙垣你要修了，因为那个墙已经破了，你要把它修起来。
Just like how in the book of Micah, it describes that we ought to build up the broken walls.
那墙修好了，境界才有可能开展嘛。
And once the walls have been rebuilt, then it is for your boundaries to expand.
以赛亚书58章，其实它的原本的在讲这个禁食这件事情哈。
So in fact, Isaiah chapter 58, the main theme of this chapter is actually talking about fasting.
但是这些以色列人他们禁食，他们的行为并没有改变呐哈。
And it recalls, even though how the Israelites they fasted, they did not change in their behavior.
比如说，好，我有宗教的行动我有禁食我有好像做圣工这样哈，我有那可是他的没有什么效果哈。
And even though they claim that they are fasting, they are performing this religious rites, however, they are unable to produce good results.
所以说第6节说我的这个，我们来看一下因为他第58篇的第3节说你们禁食他们说我们禁食，你为什么没有看见？那神好像没有在看见一样
And in chapter 58, verse 3, they have said, why have we fasted and you have not seen? So they claim that God has not seen that they are actually fasting.
但是神就透过先知告诉他说，你们禁食还是互相争竞打人然后呢行为没有什么改变
But God through the prophet said to the people that even though you fast, however, there is still strife and quarrel among them, and there are still violence that is occurring among them.
那神真的要的是什么呀
So what does God truly require of them?
好，如果我们用个想象，比如说你在我们开始在很热心的这种禁食侍奉这些就好像一个墙一样一个墙。
So if we think about this, when we first started our work, we may fast, and then and when we start to do this certain divine work, it is just like us rebuilding up these walls.
但是你会发现奇怪，为什么神好像没有在你身上有什么太大的感动就信仰没有产生力量，那就问题有破口的意思嘛
However, when you do all these things and you discover that you have not received any special experiences of being moved by God, then perhaps you need to reflect that perhaps there are some breaches in the walls.
所以第6节之后就谈到说，神要的禁食之外，还要求你什么东西这样
So from verse 6 onwards, it recorded that apart from fasting, what else does God require of his people?
好，我们来整理几项第一个就是我们看第九节第9节。
So we'll summarize a few things. Let's firstly read from verse 9. Verse 9, then you shall call and the Lord will answer. You shall cry and he will say, here I am. If you take away the yoke from your midst, the pointing of the finger and speaking of wickedness.
换句话说，你今天我们的禁食的祷告，或者我们的祷告，一定要神有个回应嘛，你这个祷告才有它的意义了
So in other words, it's teaching us that when we fast and pray today, we need to get some kind of a response from God. Only then that what we are doing is meaningful.
就像这个雅比斯祷告，后来后面神就应允他的祈求嘛就像
And just like how Jabez, when he prayed to God, we can see that the Bible recorded that God granted him what he requested.
好，那到底要把哪些破口补起来呢
So what are these breaches in which we must mend and repair?
后面说你要从中间除掉恶了
So the later part of this verse tells us that you must get rid of the wickedness from among you.
那这个所谓的恶是指的这个犯人控制犯人的那个器具了
And when it talks about wickedness, it refers to the tools in which they use to constrain those who are wicked, the evildoers.
就是有些事情呢，我们好像这个被限制住了，那这些事这个好像我们就犯人被辖制住一样哈。
And there are certain things that sometimes can enchain us. It's just like how a person has been restrained.
可能是我们的生活的习惯哈。
Perhaps this is referring to certain habits that we have in our daily lives.
那我们讲的是不好的习惯哈。
Of course, we're referring to bad habits.
或者是说有一些忘不掉的仇恨哈。
Or perhaps we are unable to forget or hold on to grudges against certain people.
或是让自己能远离神的这些性格哈。
Or perhaps we have certain characteristics which makes us draw further away from God.
那这边讲的这个恶是指后面哈，他们也谈到说指责人的时候并发恶言的事情哈。
So here in the last phrase, it talks about the pointing of the finger and speaking of wickedness.
就是说你一直看到人家的不好，哇，一直指指点点这样子的哈。
In other words, that you always look at the bad sides of other people and you point your fingers at them.
所以说那个他的英文翻得很好，就是指来指去的那个死舌头，就是专人家找人家麻烦的哈。
And always there will these sort of people that always look onto the weaknesses of others.
那这边说发恶言是指的伤害神跟人关系的这种话，这些事情哈。
And the last part, speaking wickedness, refers to these people. They are the ones that would to ruin the relationship man has with God.
换句话说哈，我们不要觉得反正讲话讲完了，大家都忘记了，对不对？好，自己有时候都忘记了。好。
So let us all please take note that don't regard what you say, the words that you speak, as something that is trivial.
有时候我们讲的话是会得罪神的哈。
Because sometimes the words that we speak can sin against God.
有一次我在家里聚会在谈有关于什么叫怨言哈。
So once during a family service, I had a discussion with members regarding what does it mean by murmuring or complaining.
如果你看使徒行传第6章哈。
If we refer to the book of Acts, chapter 6,
第6章第1节说这些人就发怨言嘛哈。
The book of Acts, chapter 6, verse 1, here he talks about a group of people started to complain.
那这个发怨言之后呢，是因为说因为那个时候他们在每天的供给上忽略了那些寡妇了哈。
And this group of people, they complained because the widows were being neglected in their daily distribution.
所以说那个使徒他们就开始检讨，好，那我们不要再处理这个行政上事务，所以我们就选7个专门在负责这些事情哈。
So the apostles reflected upon this and decide among themselves that they would choose 7 people to look after this administrative work.
好，那问题是，这边他们在发怨言，神没有处罚他们啊，圣灵没有责备他们啊。
And we can see that in this chapter, even though this group of people complained, but we cannot see that God that God passed judgment on them, that God was angry with this group of people who complained.
那我们再看回来，我们来看一下这个民数记哈。
But then let us refer to the book of Numbers.
好，民数记我们来看一下第20章啊哈。
Numbers chapter 20.
应该是我们看21章好了哈。
Chapter 21.
那这边也是看到他们就因为他们走到一条路，那个路很不好走嘛哈。
And in this chapter, we can see how the Israelites, they have come to a place, and this particular journey was very difficult for them.
所以第4节说心里很烦躁啦，所以就谤赌神哈。
Verse 4 of this chapter talks about how the soul of the people became very discouraged on the way.
好，那到底你要怎么去判断说我的发怨言已经惹了神的愤怒了啊？
So how should we discern whether our complaints or our murmuring, whether it has incurred the wrath of God?
所以你如果用使徒行传第6章那边是最好的标准，说好，我把问题提出来，那到此为止了哈。
And using the example in the book of Acts as our benchmark, we can say that we can raise our concern, our issue, and just leave it at that.
那他们就会踩刹车，好，你不要再继续想下去了，你不要再把这个东西发酵出去了哈。
And then you need to step on the brake and no longer need to continue talking about this matter.
对，比如说那个都是那些使徒看不起我们也寡妇啦，教会没有爱心啦，事实上不是这样子啊。
There is no need to over-exaggerate about the matter by saying that the apostle does not have love, does not care for the widow, etc.
好，那就是他已经过了那个界限，就是说你问题提出来，但是你太多的解释了，然后就埋怨了教会，埋怨了神，这样。
And this is what we mean by you are overstepping the boundary, and that even after you have raised the issue, you went over the boundaries and exaggerated things.
好，如果你看到这个民数记第21章，就是这个例子啦。
And if you turn back to Numbers 21 and looking at this example,
对，这条路很难走，然后大家心里很烦躁，这个是正常现象，神不会责怪他们的。
The journey they embarked on was extremely difficult, and the people became discouraged. And this is a natural response.
但是他们没有去控制好，接下来你看到他已经开始在埋怨神，埋怨摩西了。
And however, we can see that the people were not able to control themselves. Following on, we can see that the people spoke against Moses and God.
你们为什么把我们带到埃及呢？从埃及带出来，让我们死在旷野呢？
They complained by saying, "Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness?"
没有水，没有粮，哇，那个麻辣很淡薄，没什么不好吃啊。
And there is no food, no water, and our soul loathes this worthless bread.
这个时候他们已经出埃及30几年了嘞。
And at that point in time, they've already left Egypt for more than 30 years.
所以坦白说，这个时候他们还在想说，你为什么要把我们带出埃及？所以代表说，那个刹车没有刹住啦。
And at this point in time, after 30 years, the people are still complaining, asking Moses, why did you bring us out of Egypt? And this already tells us that these people, they were unable to put on the brakes or to control themselves.
那所以他已经过头了，认为说把这个摩西跟神的动机去曲解了，所以后面让神就生气了。
And because they have crossed the line, and that is why they've incurred the wrath of God.
所以有时候我们在讲话的时候呢，有时候当然碰到就是让你心烦的事，你会讲一些抱怨的话，那个都无所谓，那个是很正常的。
Therefore, we need to be careful of the words we say. Although at times when we encounter difficulties, we can express our frustration. This is a normal reaction.
但是这好像那车子是开始在走下坡的时候，你要赶快踩刹车啊！你不踩刹车就什么话都乱讲了。
But in this kind of situation, it is just like we're driving our car down a hill. We must remember to tell ourselves to step on the brake. If we don't, then things can get out of hand.
就会像以色列百姓一样，发怨言，然后甚至有些人就死在旷野了。
And then if we don't step on the brakes, then we will be like the Israelites in the wilderness, and they continue to complain, grumble against Moses, and then and in the end, bad things happen to them.
因为影响信心的怨言真的会让我们跟神那个关系非常紧张的。
Because their complaints, their murmuring actually affected the faith of the people, and that is why it is such a serious matter.
好，那再看回来以赛亚书第58章。
Let's turn back to the book of Isaiah, chapter 58.
接下来就是对人要怎么做。
And continuing in the passage, it tells us that what they ought to do towards each other.
好，所以第10节说，你向这个饥饿人呢发怜悯。我们请帮我们读第10节。好，第10节。
In verse 10, it says that, verse 10, if you extend your soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then your light shall dawn in the darkness, and your darkness shall be as the noonday.
换句话说，在我们的生命当中，要学习对人存怜悯，帮助有需要的人。
So in other words, it teaches us that in our lives, we need to learn to have mercy and kindness to other people, to help those who are in need.
有的是他在某些事上有需要，那我们去用物质上或是用行动上去帮助他。
There are certain people that requires our help, whether it is materially or others. If we can, we need to offer this help for them.
那有些人是这个心底非常愁苦那你要怎么让他满足？那当然这要求神帮忙了。
And some people, they experience extreme sorrows in their heart. Then we need to think about how we can help them and pray to God to help them overcome this.
我觉得我们现在最好方法其实就是祷告了。
So I feel that for a lot of things, the best way to resolve it is through prayers.
我相信感谢神，我们在墨本教会在这方面也真的做得不错了哈。
And we thank the Lord that for us believers here in Melbourne, and that we do quite well in this area.
有人在比如说生病啦，或是重大的事件的时候，我们会发起祷告来陪这些困苦的人走过这个死荫幽谷。
And whenever we have certain believers who are going through difficult times in their lives, whether it be illnesses or other things, the church would organize special prayer times and to pray for them, to help them overcome this difficult period.
那我想不只是这些被帮助的人得到造就。
So I believe that not only are those that we are praying for, they receive a benefit from this.
他用说你的光在黑暗中发现，就是会破晓，意思说好像白天走过黑暗，开始白天起来了然后看到光明的意思，这样
And here it describes how the light shall dawn in the darkness, and it is as if that the light gradually shines through the darkness that surrounds us.
那这个当然不是说我们帮助别人就要从神里面得到什么好处啦。我想我们也不需要这样想
So this is also not saying that the reason why we help others is so that we can receive certain blessings from God. I'm not trying to say this.
但是因为我们已经在代祷这件事情当中，常常在祈求神来帮助困苦的人嘛
But because through our intercessory prayers, we pray to God to help those who are in sufferings.
当自己碰到需要神的指引的时候，你就会很自然的跪在神面前求神的指引
And because we do this all the time, and therefore when we ourselves encounter difficulties or sufferings, we know what we need to do, and that we would kneel down and pray to God to help us in this matter.
所以11节就是说，神会时常引领你，然后在干旱之地使你心满意足，骨头强壮
And that is why in verse 11 it says that the Lord will guide you continually and satisfy the soul in drought and strengthen your bones.
换句话说，神会引导你，然后让你有力量，然后走过这种困难的环境，就干旱之地的困难的环境
In other words, that God will guide us and He will guide us through this difficult journey ahead of us.
然后给你力量，就让你骨头强壮，就是赐给力量的意思。
And to strengthen our bones means to give us strength to go through these things.
我想我最近也听到一些很不错的这些见证都值得大家去我们互相的学习
And I've recently heard of a lot of good testimonies in which I feel it can be something that we can learn a lot from.
那有的去陪人的这种祷告
And some of these testimonies describes how the believers, they would accompany others and intercede with them in their prayers.
或是说有些人他在这个pandemic 过程当中去看这些正道的这些道理
Or some describes that during this pandemic, they would listen to more of the sermons.
他们就会把觉得说这篇道理好像某某人需要，他们就会分享给对方这样。
And after listening to sermons, they might feel that this is someone needs to listen to this. These are very good, and they will send it to this particular person.
就会有些人就从你们当中重新这样子重新得力了重新得力。
And there are a lot of people through listening to these sermons, they are able to be strengthened in their faith.
那这样子见证一听多的时候，我自己也会得到一些造就
And after listening to so many of such testimonies, for myself, I also learn a lot from them.
所以有时候真的是有时候大环境的改变不至于，我这样感觉这1年多来对教会来讲好像正面的多过负面的
So I feel that in this last year and a little bit, even though our environment and situation changed, but I feel that as a church, we've also experienced a lot of positive things as well.
但不是说我们都说在网络上聚会比较好啦，不是这个意思
I'm not saying that it is better to have services online. I'm not saying this.
还是要回到会堂，大家聚集一起赞美神、吃饭、感谢神，这个都是属于崇拜的 的一部分啦哈。
And when we are able, we still all need to gather back together physically, to have worship together, worship session together, to have fellowship together. This is all part of our worship to the Lord.
好，不能说因为网络上有正面的，就是我们以后就不需要在会堂聚会了，不能这样讲了哈。
So we cannot say that even though there are certain positive things that can come out from this, then we all should continue on having services online. We cannot say this.
我们只能说感谢神，神这段时间透过科技，然后加上爱心让这个造就的人事情也不会受到空间的限制。
All that we can say is that even though we are in a difficult situation or environment, however, through the grace of God, that we are able to still have services through the technology that we have, and through the love that brothers and sisters have helped setting up this platform for us.
那这种属灵的疆界扩张你看到他说，你必像浇灌的园子，像这个水流不绝的这个泉源
So as for our spiritual boundaries, we can see how it describes here in verse 11, second part, that it shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water.
那尤其在这个沙漠地区哇，那个泉源出来的，你让那些行过那个旷野地的人，他们会非常非常的兴奋
And particularly if it's in the wilderness, if people are able to find spring of water in the wilderness, this is something that people would be very happy about.
所以这雅歌有一句话这么讲嘛
And in the book of Song of Songs, there is a verse that describes.
他说在第1章我们看第1章的第14节说我为我的良人为一棵凤仙花在隐基底的葡萄园种
In chapter 1 of Song of Songs, verse 14, it says here, My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blooms in the vineyards of En-gedi.
那隐基底就是那个The spring of gold 这个山羊之泉山羊之泉
So the En-gedi is also referred to as the spring of goats.
说在这种哇很这个旷野的地方你就看到有那个山羊之泉哇，那你就觉得很兴奋了
And then in an area in which it is a wilderness, you are able to find springs of water in this area.
同样的，我们刚才讲说这个你就像那个浇灌这个什么，刚刚讲那个以赛亚书58章就是浇灌的园子，然后那个水一直不断的流嘛水不断的流。
And just like how it's being described in the book of Isaiah 58, that we shall be like the watered garden, like a spring of water which never fails.
在这段有些人他需要别人帮助的时候呢，你就像这个泉源，然后让他喝到那个水，就整个人就苏醒过来一样
And in this difficult time, if for those who requires our help and our support, let us be like this spring of water, waters in which can refresh people.
好，那现在透过其实像网络有些人就会有，譬如说家族之间的一起的祷告或是说朋友好朋友之间的彼此的祷告
And through the online platform, there are also a lot of brethren who gather together to pray and to intercede for one another.
还有一些是宗教教育老师陪着学生祷告
And there are also some in which the RE teachers would use this platform to pray together with their students.
好，那他们这些在本来就有些信心开始在跌到谷底当中，开始得到激励了
And then it is through this that for some of our brethren, even though their faith initially was on a decline, but through doing all these works, their faith was able to be revived.
所以12节说，出于你的人必修造久已经荒废之处了
That is why verse 12, it says that those from among you shall build the old waste places.
好，然后呢，这个你要重新建立那个被拆毁的那些根基
And you shall once again raise up the foundations of many generations.
好，然后这后面就是刚才我们所讲的，你要成为补破口的，就是把人家的那个裂缝把它补起来神的那个裂缝补起来
In the last part, and we've mentioned this before, it talks about how we shall be the repairer of the breach from within the walls.
然后还有重修路径与人居住，就是那个修那个道路了然后道路被修了之后呢，那很多人就越来越多聚集了这样
And to be the restorer of the streets to dwell in. And when we are able to repair the streets in the cities, then many people will be able to come and dwell in that city.
因为当我们在讲路的时候，有几个方向，就是说可能是这个城跟这个城的连结你修好之后，这个城就 两边城就可以连接在一起哈。
So when we talk about streets, we can look at from a different perspective. Perhaps this main street connects one major city to another major city.
这个是，或是说我们有些人他是做好像中保的角色哈，让人跟神能够和好，那感谢神啊，很好啊哈。
And we can think of this that there are certain people who act as a mediator between God and another person, and this is a good thing to do.
我就听到有姐妹分享说，他们透过这样子的祷告，透过这样圣的读经分享，让这些软弱的家人慢慢的建立起来后，哇，听了就我自己也受到感动。我看那个讲的姐妹，她也是很兴奋的哈。
And I have once heard a sister shared how through prayer and also through the studying of the Word of God, she was able to help in building up the weak faith of the family members. And after hearing this, I myself also was quite moved by the testimony.
好，那就觉得说，你真的让人慢慢的信心被重建。你自己在中间，其实你也受到很多的造就了。
And as a mediator, and if you're trying to help to build up the faith of others around you, you yourself can also learn a lot from this experience.
然后第13节、14节，当然，它内容看起来好像是守安息日，对，这是事实啊，是讲守安息日了哈。
And continuing on verse 13 to verse 14, we can see that the content of these two verses is talking about the Sabbath.
我要讲一个说更扩大，就是说你有高品质的安息的人生啊，我想讲这个啦哈。
And so what I would like to expound a little bit more regarding this, and that it refers to us having a greater quality of observing the Sabbath.
我意思说，你今天这个有得到一个安息人生，不是只有安息日那一天啊，应该是整个生命都这样子啊哈。
And that we are able to obtain Sabbath throughout all our lives, and not just once a week, one day a week.
所以当你开始扩张你的境界的时候呢，其实更重要的是你这个生命是不是一个得到安息的生命哈。
So as we enlarge our spiritual territory, we can reflect upon and think about whether our life has have entered into like the Sabbath.
好，所以我们看第14节哈。
Let us read verse 14. Verse 14, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on the high hills of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father. The mouth of the Lord has spoken.
什么叫做有高品质的安息人生？什么意思？哈。
So what does it mean to enjoy a life of like entering into Sabbath?
就是说你会以神为乐了哈。
That is, you shall delight yourself in the Lord your whole life.
我相信大家都会有喜欢做什么事情的这种的经验哈。
So I believe all of us will have this experience, whether we enjoy or we delight in doing certain things.
比如说你假设你喜欢煮了哈，煮饭哈。
For example, if you are interested and you enjoy cooking.
当然煮饭来讲过程是很辛苦的啊，哇，又要准备又要什么，这个过程很辛苦嘛，对不对哈？
And of course, we know that in order to cook, the cooking process involves a lot of hard work.
但是因为你喜欢，所以你不会觉得苦啊。
But because you enjoy doing the work, and therefore you do not regard it as something strenuous or hard for you to do.
我曾经看到一个弟兄，他做那个模型啊。
So once I saw how a brother, he was building a model.
那这个他是用那个做那个船哈，那个大的像那个船啊、飞机的那种模型。
And he was building all kinds of models of ships or of planes.
那个要很细心的，每一样就把它粘好，把它组合。如果是我的话，我大概就放弃了。
So this kind of work is actually very intricate and actually very difficult. So I feel that not everyone can take up this particular hobby.
但是这个弟兄很喜欢啊。
But as for this brother, he enjoyed doing this work.
好，那我们用这个来去类比，就是说如果你真的以神为乐的时候，即使你有些辛苦，但你不会觉得对你来讲什么负担呢？
So using these as examples, so if we think about it, if we delight ourselves in the Lord, then a lot of things that relates to our faith in life, when it becomes difficult, we will not feel that it is hard for us to go through.
那这时候神也给你两样哦，第一个是叫地的高处，成价地的高处。
And in this time, God will give you two things. First thing, you will He will cause you to ride on the high hills of the earth.
这种属灵的疆界另外一个角度就是说你站在更高的地方，就意思说你更安全，你的视野更广的意思
And when we talk about expanding our territories, if you are able to stand on high hills, it means that this place is safe for you, and also it's also a place for you to able to see further of the place that from where you're standing.
对神的旨意更能够明白
And you are able to understand clearer the will of God for you.
那对自己的软弱看得更清楚
And you are able to see even more clearly your own weaknesses and areas in which you're lacking.
所以你要了解以色列他们那个地方来讲，那种他为什么他们耶路撒冷然后撒玛利亚都站在这个高处，原因在这个地方
So we can understand why in the land of Israel they often have their cities, for example in Samaria, Jerusalem, they are on high hills.
那第二个比较难理解就是说什么叫做雅各的产业养育你
And the second point here refers, it's a bit hard to understand. What does it mean by the heritage of Jacob, feeding you on the heritage of Jacob?
因为雅各的产业，你就是牛羊这些东西，他可能养育他的家族可以，问题是我们可能跟我们没什么关系
So what does it mean by feeding you with the heritage of Jacob? Is it referring to the physical possession he has? For example, his herds that he possesses.
我来看一下这个创世纪
Let us turn to the book of Genesis.
48章
Chapter 48.
48章在最后面的时候21节22节谈到说，当以色列要过世之前，就是雅各要过世之前
Verse 21 to verse 22, here it records the time when Israel was dying.
那结果他就跟约瑟说我要死了那我以前那块地那个用弓用刀从亚摩利人夺下那块地那个要赐给你
So when Israel was about to die, he said to Joseph that the land in which he had taken from the hand of the Amorite with his sword and his bow, this land will be given to you as a portion.
那个你是约瑟
And this person he's speaking to was Joseph.
约瑟是宰相，地要多少就有多少那么高的官
And we know that Joseph was the prime minister throughout the whole land of Egypt. Does he need more land?
那这个好像说我这个有人在这个中间，这个我们 Victoria 中间有一个小块的农地
So this is just like if a person were to own a small piece of land in the middle of Victoria.
那结果他的小孩在我们 Melbourne 的 CBD 拥有3栋大楼
But this person's child owns three large mansions in a CBD.
结果呢，这个他就跟他儿子说：“哎呀，你不要忘记了，我们在故乡那边有一个小小的农地这个给你，这个给你
It is just like this man saying, his child saying, "Oh, you must remember that our family we own in our hometown we own this small plot of land. I will give you this small plot of land now."
你想想看，如果你拥有3栋大楼的这个地主，你会想要那块地吗？哇，这个是没什么价值的。
So if we imagine if we already own 3 large mansions, do we still want this small piece of land?
但是你发现约瑟他听得懂这个意思。
But we see here that actually Joseph he understood what his father meant.
所以他宁可不卖账，就告诉他的子孙说：“你一定要把我带回去那块地，那个我爸爸赐给我的。”
And because of that, we can see he later instructed his families that after he died, that he must be brought back to this land which his father has given him.
因为他知道在埃及这个不是他的地，虽然名义上是他的，但是换了改朝换代就可能换了别人的。
And because he knew very clearly that the land that he has in Egypt does not truly belong to him. If the dynasty were to change over time, then he might lose everything.
但是他爸爸给他那块地是神应许要给他们的，这个跑不掉的啦，这个一辈子这个跑不掉的啦
However, the land in which his father has given him is a land that has been promised and given by God, and therefore they will always possess this land.
所以我们讲所有的雅各的产业是意思说带着应许的这些有价值的事情
So when we talk about the heritage of Jacob, we are referring to things that has been promised by God.
神所应许我们将来给我们产业一样
For example, the promised inheritance in which we will receive in the future.
对，现在还没有给我们，因为我们还在埃及
And it is true that even though right now we haven't received this inheritance because we are still living in Egypt.
但是这个不是我们的啦。
However, whatever we own in Egypt today does not truly belong to us.
只要我今天，你想想看，你今天假设有10栋房子
So if we think about this, if today we were to own 10 houses,
但是当你离开世上的时候
but on the time when you depart from this world,
你跟你的小孩说，留一栋给我吧，名字留一栋给我。对不起，政府还是把你名字拿掉。
So would you say to your children that, oh, please reserve one house, still that it belongs to me and has my name? Would this truly happen? Of course not.
但是天上这个产业是绝对不会拿掉的。
However, our inheritance in heaven cannot be taken away from us.
所以刚刚这个以赛亚书58章的第14节所谓的你的雅各的产业是指的那个带有应许的这个有价值的事情。
So in chapter 58, and this verse here, the heritage of Jacob refers to the promised thing that will be given to us, things that are of high value.
所以，但当你站在地高处的时候，你眼界开阔的时候，你看的是雅各给你的产业，而不是你在埃及里面所得到的这些东西。
And so when you are riding on high hills and you're standing on the high hills, looking out, you can see the heritage of Jacob that will be given to you in the future.
好，所以这就是我们讲所谓的属灵的境界的扩张的意思。
So this is what we mean by expanding our spiritual territories.
把这个不好的这些恶行拿掉。
And that is, we need to rid of all our bad habits.
对人不再指责，不再用这种轻蔑的态度去指责人。
So we no longer point our fingers and criticize other people.
然后接下来你会对人成一个纯怜悯的心，帮助有需要的人。
And then with a pure heart and with a heart of mercy, we would help those who are in need.
好，然后你被神引导，得到力量，然后战胜克服这个困难的环境。
And you allow God to guide you, to give you strength, so that you can overcome your difficult environment.
因为你的生命的丰盛，所以你可以让旁边的人得到造就，那他们重新建立他们的信仰，他们的城墙。
And because your life is filled with abundance and blessings from God, you are able to help those around you, those who are weak in faith, are able to build up their own walls.
最后你就是有一个真正有平安、有安息的人生。
And at the very end, you are able to have true rest, true peace, the true life of Sabbath.
因为你被神架在地的高处，所以你更安全，视野更广阔，你的跟神的关系更亲密。
Because you are able to ride on high hills, you are able to see what is further ahead, and you are able to receive all these promised inheritance from God.
那个时候，你的眼光所看重的是那种雅各的产业，意思说带有应许、永恒的这个有神永恒保证的应许的产业了。
And at that time, your eyes were able to see the heritage of Jacob, in which refers to the promised inheritance from God, in which it is eternal.
好，那剩下的我们星期六再继续说。
And as for the remaining teachings, we will continue our discussion on Saturday.
好，我们一起来唱诗453首。
Let us all sing hymn 453.